We're going live now to Venezuela with Bruno Fauci, who is Telesur's correspondent in Venezuela, to tell us how this news is resonating in Venezuela as another attempt at intimidation and an attack on the country's sovereignty. Bruno, thank you so much for your participation here with us. Good morning. Tell us.
Good morning, Talita. Good morning, TVT. Good morning to the entire Brazilian audience that is joining us once again for this broadcast. I am here in Caracas, as you can see, the city here, the view of the city behind me at the Telesur headquarters, where I will try to explain to you a little more about what has been happening, this further harassment. More, well, interference from the United States against the government and against the Venezuelan people as a sort of emperor of the world, remembering that Venezuela, along with Cuba, is one of the most attacked countries in the world and the most attacked in Latin America by the United States, not only by the Trump administration, but it's something that has been going on for a long time since the beginning of the Bolivarian Revolution and the taking of power. Democratically elected, these are democratically elected governments of Hugo Chavez in 1999. Venezuela, since 2015, has been suffering from severe economic sanctions that were applied to it. In total, there are almost 1,000 economic sanctions applied to Venezuela. Today, Brazil, through these sanctions applied by the Trump administration, can better understand what it means. This type of harassment against the country. And Venezuela, in short, in these last few days, in these last few weeks, has suffered a new attack from the United States. This time, the Trump administration accuses the Bolivarian government, the government of Nicolas Maduro, the Venezuelan government, and the Venezuelan nation of being a route for international drug trafficking and one of the world's largest producers of narcotics, including a reward of $50 million for the head of the President of the Republic, Nicolas Maduro. Venezuela presented its defense in recent days and used the United Nations report as a basis. And from the European Union released now, in June, in which the main drug trafficking routes in the world, the main producers in the world, and Venezuela does not appear on this list, it is not even mentioned. In fact, in the last 15 years, it has done a great job in combating drug trafficking. And drugs, removing it completely from this list of drug trafficking routes. And another important fact is that the Venezuelan government, unlike the United States government, which accuses, still presents no evidence, which accuses without even having a formal complaint about the accused. Venezuela recently seized kilos of bombs that were being planned and another new manual for the attempted terrorist attack here in Caracas, in the center of the capital. Kilos of bombs were seized that were being planned by the Venezuelan far right, led by Maria Corina Machado, together with the United States government, to detonate and cause maximum damage and deaths. Here in the Venezuelan capital, we can better understand today, also with Bolsonarism in Brazil, what this far right means, these repeated attempts at coups, terrorism, and interference, together with the United States in this nation. Anyway, 15 people were arrested and are being accused with evidence and a whole legal process of terrorism in this country. Venezuela then continues in its struggle, like Brazil, for autonomy and for sovereignty, mainly for the sovereignty of its nation and against external interference, especially coming from the United States and its allies.
Perfect, Bruno. Bruno, is there a question for Bruno?
No, Bruno gave a wonderful overview of what is at stake. And I just wanted Bruno to comment a little because the backdrop of this persecution, new persecution of President Maduro and Venezuela and so on, comes from the old discourse of the war on drugs. The war on drugs has to end. It has to, and it's very crazy Because the country that trafficked the most drugs in the planet's existence was England trafficking to China. We are seeing the strengthening of this war on drugs discourse throughout the world. In the United States, there is this alarming situation with fentanyl, which according to American authorities, it all comes from China. So we can already predict there will be an escalation against China. There already is. China is already being branded more because of this accusation of not combating the trafficking of fentanyl to the United States. Now, you, Bruno, are you seeing this discussion of the war on drugs being used against the BRICS throughout the world? Do you see an escalation in this narrative?
That's an important question, Lola. Your interventions are always important. It's also important to remember that the United States, in this report from the European Union and the United Nations, points to the United States as the largest recipient of drugs in the world, the largest consumer of drugs, in which in the year 2019 alone, 48,000 people died due to excessive drug use in the United States. A kind of hypocrisy to use Venezuela, since it is one of the largest countries, to encourage this type of trade. As for the use of the narrative of combating drugs, to intervene in countries, and because this interference that the United States has been causing in Latin America for a long time, this is before the Trump administration. In Colombia, for example, the supposed fight against drugs, the Plan Colombia, it led the United States to install several American military bases in its territory and to intervene directly in the politics of the Colombian nation. A serious problem that this country faces, where the problem was not solved and the drug problem worsened. And the United States used this as a political argument to open military bases. And we know well that once American military bases are installed, to remove them is an extremely difficult process, which can even provoke wars with the United States. See the case of the Middle East. So the United States uses this argument a lot, especially for us, Latin Americans, of combating drugs to intervene in our nations. Many countries in South America have American military bases based on this discourse of combating drugs. So the United States also uses this discourse in other parts of the world, in the Middle East, and it will continue attacking sovereignty, and the BRICS being its main target today, because the BRICS work with a very different foreign policy. China works with a foreign policy that is completely the opposite of the United States. The United States intervenes militarily. It intervenes in the country's economic policy. It demands, when you take out a loan in the United States, it demands to intervene in your economic policy, in your social policy. A series of interventions come along with the International Monetary Fund, right? See what is happening, for example, in Argentina. A clear sign that foreign aid from the IMF, in fact, it comes to cause more poverty, more hunger, more social inequality. Half of the Argentine people today are in poverty and cannot pay their bills. Retirees get beaten every day by Milei's police. And the most attacked country is a peaceful country with no social conflicts, with no conflicts. As in Argentina, there is an attempt of interference by the United States along with the far right in Venezuela. But the people here live in peace. They always say in the streets of Venezuela that they want peace, that they want tranquility, including recent electoral processes here, municipal elections, elections for governor, in which there was no conflict. It was completely normal, and contrary to what is said by the hegemonic press, by CNN, by Globo and its allies, there is participation of the opposition in Venezuela's elections. What there isn't is the participation of an extremist, far-right opposition that seeks to use terrorism to cause chaos and a civil war in the country, to then overthrow a government that is democratically elected and that they do not recognize as such. And this is the main problem in Venezuela. external interference and the interference caused by the Venezuelan far right, subordinate to the United States. We can't fail to mention, man, how I think we've never understood the persecution of Venezuela as much as we are being forced to understand today.
It's didactic, isn't it? We used to take Maduro's case. Today we are seeing you have to disqualify Bolsonaro, prevent Bolsonaro from. You see how it's the same. The guys who tried to overthrow Chavez, elected democratically, were prevented from running for office, and Red Day Globo comes and says, look what an injustice. The story of Maria Corina, actually. Maria Corina, look what an injustice. But these guys are terrorists. So you have to stop the guys from participating. To defend democracy, we never had to understand. We are being forced to understand the harassment that Venezuela has been suffering since Chavez's first government. Because we let the same snake grow here,
of a great milestone, the first milestone perhaps of this moment, I'll call it current, because they talk about Chavismo to this day. The President Chavez died so long ago, and they use this term because it's a marked term, right? It was when the television channel was closed, Venezuela Vision, I don't remember the name, that simply preached a coup d'etat every other day. And then the channel is closed, and that's the end of freedom. Is the end of freedom as we know.
Look, I went to Venezuela once, and the guys, Globo here, saying there's no freedom of expression in Venezuela. It's absurd. What a thing, man. I turned on the television. On broadcast TV, I went and said, no, it must be cable TV. It's not possible. It's not possible. The guy was cursing, but it wasn't that he was expressing a disagreement. He called Chavez everything. I can't say here what he said. It was an absurd thing. I said, no, this can't be TV. It was broadcast TV. Meanwhile, Globo was of a channel. That was later. Taken off. That preached, which I think was that one, openly preaching the coup. And what do? You have to take it off, people. And that's it. Meanwhile, Globo was saying there was no democracy in Venezuela. Unfortunately, we are having to learn how these guys play hard when it comes to enslaving a people.
Guys, I'm commenting here on Iara. She said, it's the same playbook, exactly that. Bruno, thank you very much for being with us here today. I'll send you a hug. Until next time.
Thank you, Talita. Thank you, Laura. And it's always a pleasure to be able to count on Telesur and myself to bring the news here, directly from Caracas in Venezuela, very different from Globo, which talks about Venezuela from Miami. So, it is important to remember that, in fact, these media outlets do not have journalists on the ground. They speak from outside with news directly from CNN, which is also not present in this territory, about what is happening here. So we at Telesur are here at your disposal, as is Brasil de Fato, which is also in this territory. Perfect. A kiss to you, Bruno.